Thanks for staying with the CTV News. Business Month activities continued with a debate on this Arthur Lewis economic model and its relevance to St. Lucia that happened on Wednesday evening. The two teams involved were the National Youth Council and Monroe College. The topic, the Arthur Lewis economic model, if implemented, could revive St. Lucia's economy. Monroe College was asked to propose. Their team was led by Anderson Henry, with Dahlia Phillip as the seconder. Opposing the topic was the National Youth Council, led by Eleanor Joseph and Isibe Francis as the seconder. Calabash TV will air the full debate next week, but here we now present the summary of the delivery by the teams.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard our arguments in support of the proper implementation of Sir Arthur Lewis's dual sector model. And I want to commend my opponents for actually reinforcing our argument that for an economic model to work, it must be valid and relevant to the context. You would have recalled that I mentioned that Sir Arthur was forward-thinking. And in our arguments, we said, and I want to stick that with you, that while Sir Arthur at the time spoke to dualism as it pertained to agriculture and industrialization, in this modern day, the subsistence sector and the capitalist sector take on different forms. And we spoke of a capitalist sector not characterized by industrialization as we saw with the factories, but a capitalist sector now characterized by our knowledge capital driven by innovation and technology, and the service sector, which already is the driver of this economy. You listen to me, it can work. It has worked in Singapore. How did they get it done? Through discipline. Political discipline and a contract with the people, that the government would create an environment that would foster prosperity for the people, and that the people would be enterprising and hardworking. This is how it works. This is how any model works. Do not be a doubter, be a believer, and look at how an example can work for you. And we have a sterling one in the form of Singapore. We never considered that the model was not going to work in St. Lucia because it was based on, you mentioned an English model. Singapore is not, are the residents of Singapore from England? I don't think so. They have their own dynamic similar to the Caribbean, and yet it worked. So why are we saying that this model, which presumably was developed because Sir Arthur was in the UK at the time and he borrowed from the English, worked? The guys in Singapore got it right. We are at a juncture, and we need to rethink our economic development approach, as it is a matter of bread and butter, not for academic debate, for the citizenry of this country. I leave you with the words and the thought of my tailor, who was once employed at one of those factories, and we say that he was not skilled and they were not trained. And he said to me, my friend, I worked at Bell Fashions, one of those factories. I was trained to fix sewing machines. When the company moved out, and yes, they do move, there was an opportunity for government and the country to build national industries driven by local entrepreneurs. These jobs are now elsewhere. We need to build local industry, and there are skillful people here.
The National Youth Council will now summarize their argument.
For a little while, I thought I was in a different room. Two different models. One in 1954, one in 1980, yet they're on the same team. Maybe that's the reason we can't get it right. In the original presentation by my supposed learned colleagues, there was no mention of technology. And I'm quite happy there are thoughts on Singapore, because we did mention Singapore. Singapore is, though similar in size, the dynamics are very different. a different history. One of war, ours of slavery. A different political system, a democracy, quasi-communism. We're very different. This is not a one-size-fits-all model, and maybe his tailor told him it was. But one size does not fit all. The reality is, it's 2015. And we are in a situation where we need to be creative, we need to be innovative, and we need to be youth-led. And this is why the NYC is represented here today. We have an economy which is dying, and the majority being affected, as indicated earlier, are young people. 26%, a majority of the 26% belong to youth. This is not the time to try to figure out whether Sir Arthur was brilliant. We already know that. We celebrate him. He is a son of the soil. We are proud to have more Nobel laureate per capita. But the reality remains the reality. If it is not relevant, we don't use it. It is time to be innovative. Technology is taking over, and Singapore is not doing subsistence farming. From what I heard, technology is the order of the day over there. From what I heard, they're going green. Maybe we listen to different news. Maybe we read different articles. But the reality remains Singapore is not doing subsistence farming. Let's be very careful. We don't take the good and give the scraps to our people. We need an economy which is positioned in such a way that the young people today and the young people 50 years from today can still benefit from it. And that is why we spoke about sustainable development to start off with. I champion Sir Arthur. I'm proud to be St. Lucian. I'm proud of Sir Arthur. But I believe if Sir Arthur was alive today, he would say to us, my model is obsolete and therefore needs revision. I thank you.
And Monroe, who proposed, received a total of 169 points. The National Youth Council, who opposed the argument, received 253 points. Thank you. All that is left for me is to thank the debaters, and also a special word to all the sponsors. Unfortunately, I do not have a list before me, but I would like the sponsors to know, at least in my corner, they are not forgotten.